Very good morning and welcome. You're watching World DNA. My name is Hemkaur Saroya.
And I'm Raisha Sehgal. On the show today, we will track what is happening in the US. We are just 48 hours away from the US presidential race. Both the contestants have taken the final campaigning to the battleground states, which will be key to watch out for. While Trump has campaigned in Pennsylvania, he will be holding his rally in North Carolina and Georgia. Meanwhile, Harris spent a day in Michigan. We will be tracking all of that on World DNA this morning.
And also on the show today, we continue to track what's happening in West Asia. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has said that a truce in Lebanon and Gaza could soften retribution against Israel. This statement comes a day after the United States warned Iran that it will not be able to control Israel if it attacks again. Is there a ceasefire deal on the horizon, considering we're just less than 2 days away from the US polls? That's something we'll discuss on the show today. But first, the headlines. More than 77 million people have already voted early in the US election ahead of the election day. The figure amounts to over half of the total ballots cast in the last presidential election.
A former spokesperson of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu detained for allegedly leaking confidential documents that could have jeopardized negotiations for the release of hostages.
Israel continues deadly strikes in Lebanon and Gaza as its military says more than 100 projectiles fired from Lebanon into Israeli territory on Sunday.
Iran's president says a potential ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon could affect the intensity of Tehran's response to Israel's recent strikes on Iranian military sites on October 26th.
Moldova's incumbent Maya Sandu wins presidential runoff overshadowed by allegations of Russian meddling.
Hindu-Canadian devotees attacked inside Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton. Canadian MP says red line crossed by Khalistani extremists.
Barcelona continue their brilliant form under Hansi Flick. The Catalan Giants thrash rivals Espanyol 3-1 to move 9 points clear at top of La Liga. All right, our top story this morning. Iran is preparing on an attack on Israel that will use more powerful warheads and other weapons not used in its previous 2 attacks.
Right, this according to Iranian and Arab officials briefed on the plans. They told the Wall Street Journal that Iran could use Iraqi territory for part of the operation and would likely target Israeli military facilities, but much more aggressively than the last time.
Speaking of Israel's October 26th attack that killed 4 Iranian army personnel, President Masoud Pezeshkian earlier warned that it will in no way leave any violation of its territory and security unanswered.
However, he said that a potential ceasefire between its allies, Hamas and Hezbollah and Israel, could affect the intensity of Iran's response to Israel.
Meanwhile, in the last 24 hours, Israel pressed on its campaigns in Lebanon and Gaza. Gaza rescuers said Israeli strikes on the Strip killed at least 35 people, including 17 people in the north.
At least 3 people were killed in an airstrike near the southern Lebanon city of Sidon, the Lebanese Health Ministry said, as more bombs hit the country. The Israeli Defense Forces said it has eliminated a senior commander in Hezbollah's drone unit, Al-Barakat. The IDF said that Barakat spent over a decade planning and carrying out UAV attacks on Israel.
Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired 100 missiles from Lebanon into its territory, several of which were intercepted while some fell in unpopulated areas, as per the IDF. However, the Lebanese group said that the projectiles targeted, or for the first time, Israeli military base in northern city of Haifa.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, on a visit to the Lebanon border, vowed to respond firmly to Hezbollah's attacks.
With or without an agreement, the key to returning peace and security in the north, the key to returning our evacuated residents in the north safely to their homes, is to push Hezbollah back to the litany, to strike any attempt by it to rearm, and thirdly, to respond forcefully against any action against us.
And well, for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Charles Kupchan, live from Washington, D.C. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to World DNA, Dr. Kupchan.
Good to be with you.
Likewise. Now, Iran has suggested that a truce in Lebanon and Gaza could soften retribution against Israel. But it does look like that Iran is sending mixed signals on potential retaliation against Israel, while it is suggesting that there is some sort of a scope of not that strong a response against Israel. It has also told the Arab countries that it wants to attack Israel in a higher intensity when compared to its last attack. Your assessment of the situation in West Asia right now?
Well, I think there are two different issues in play. One is, what's the prospect for a serious ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Hezbollah? And there, I think the likelihood is more fighting for the foreseeable future. Neither side seems to be holding back. Hezbollah continues to launch missiles on northern Israel. Israel keeps pounding Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon as well as on the coast and in eastern Lebanon. The American delegation was there just a few days ago, came home with nothing to show. So I don't think we're going to see much movement on a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, certainly not before we see who wins the U.S. election and how that affects the region. And secondly, I think Iran is in a difficult position right now. Israel just took a strike on its air defense system, on its ability to produce fuel for its ballistic missiles. Now its key oil production facilities lack the S-300s, the air defense system that they had. They can't get more of them because Russia is busy fighting a war in Ukraine. So I think the Iranians are going to be treading carefully here, knowing that they're exposed if they take a strike at Israel that then triggers a serious, widespread Israeli retaliation.
Right now, Dr. Kupchan, just to expand on what my colleague also said and what you've said, the Iranian president has clearly said that Iran will not leave any aggression unanswered. Of course, we've been seeing threats in the past few days as well. The question now being, what will be the nature of an Iranian attack if there is one, with reports suggesting that Iran has incurred damages in its defensive and offensive capabilities, of course.
Well, you know, I think the two Iranian attacks that we've seen so far haven't really succeeded in doing serious damage to Israel, largely because the Israelis themselves, with help from the United States and other parties, shot down most of the missiles that the Iranians have sent in. You mentioned in your report the idea that Iraq might be involved. Yes, there are Iraqi militias that are under the control of the Iranians. There are Syrian militias that are under the control of the Iranians. They could potentially launch strikes on Israel. But the bottom line is that Iran's main proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, have been very seriously degraded. Their ability to be proxies of Iran and hit Israel, they can still launch missiles, but not in a way that they could before. So Iran, I think, is, as I said, in a weak position here, and is likely, if it does respond, to try to avoid a major escalation.
Dr. Kapchan, just to add to the fact that Iran is in a weak position, its S-300 missiles have also been damaged in the precision strikes by Israel. Just to take that point forward where you mentioned that you're not really optimistic of any movement forward in the ceasefire deal, do you think that Bibi, the Israeli Prime Minister, will not make any concrete decisions, keeping in mind that we are less than 48 hours away from the US presidential polls?
Yeah, I don't see any real movement on the diplomatic front for a while, partly because of the uncertain political situation here in the United States, but also because I think from an Israeli perspective, significant progress is being made on the ground. Hamas is being deeply set back. Hezbollah pushed north away from the border. They can still do damage to Israel, but the prosecution of this offensive against Hezbollah is making a big difference. Iran now deterred because some of its air defense is gone. So I think at least for now, Bibi thinks that he can continue to use military force to take down this broad array of Iranian-backed enemies of Israel. And because that military operation is making progress on multiple fronts, I don't think we're going to see it end in the near future.
Dr. Kapchan, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA. We'll, of course, have to wait and see how the results in the US affects and impacts the conflict in West Asia. But thank you for joining us on the show.
Good night.
All right, let's shift our focus now. Russian forces are reportedly gaining more ground as they continue their advances in Ukraine's eastern region.
While Moscow has claimed to have seized 2 more settlements in Donetsk and Kharkiv regions, the Russian Defense Ministry says over the past day that its army launched attacks on the Ukrainian forces in 149 regions.
Moscow claims the Ukrainian armed forces have lost over 150 troops in the Kursk area in the past day. Ukraine's total losses since fighting began in the region have exceeded over 29,000 troops.
Ukraine, on the other hand, claims to have repelled multiple Russian attacks. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported that its forces launched multiple attacks on Russian army, destroying equipment including tanks, rocket launchers and drones. The Ukrainian army is facing one of the strongest offensives from Russia since the crisis broke out, and the forces are in need of more material and equipment supports. Ukraine has claimed that 5 injuries and damage to infrastructure in its Dnipropetrovsk region, that is after Russian attacks on Saturday.
Meanwhile, tankers from the Ukrainian ground forces are conducting training with a German-made Leopard 2A4 tank at an undisclosed location in Ukraine. These are the images of the Ukrainian forces conducting mock drills. The Ukrainian military claims this tank is far superior to its Soviet competitor, that's the T-64.
The T-64 has no advantages, because if something happens, for example, we were hit by a Leopard tank in May, the impact was so strong that it tore out the support rollers. But the Leopard survived. If it had been a T-64, I think the turret would have flown off immediately. So it holds the impact quite well.
Moving on, Moldova's pro-EU contestant and President Maia Sandu has claimed victory in a closely contested election against her pro-Russian rival Alexander Stoyanoglu.
With 98% of the ballots counted, Sandu led with 54.35% as announced by the Central Election Commission. The Socialist Party candidate secured around 48% of the votes.
Sandu delivered a victory speech expressing her gratitude to the voters of Georgia and describing the election result as historic.
Moldova este o învingătoare. Azi, dragi moldoveni, ați oferit o lecție de democrație demnă de a fi scrisă în manualele de istorie. Azi voi ați salvat Moldova. În alegerea noastră pentru un viitor demn nu a pierdut nimeni.
The EU chief Ursula von der Leyen has congratulated Moldova's President Sandu on her re-election victory. She hailed Sandu's efforts despite numerous challenges during the presidential polls.
While Sandu's victory strengthens her pro-Western agenda, her rival's strong performance suggests that her party may face major challenges in the parliamentary elections scheduled for next year. He presented a dual approach, advocating for integration with the EU while also maintaining stronger and close ties with Russia.
During the election, Sandu's National Security Advisor reported extensive attempts at interference, indicating that charter flights had been arranged to transport Moldovans from Russia to cast their votes. The official further claimed that recent cyber attacks and bomb threats during elections were intended to disrupt the electoral process.
Despite all these threats, over 250,000 Moldovans abroad participated in the electoral process. Statistics show that the majority of these overseas votes were cast for Sandu, highlighting the crucial role of the diaspora in supporting her pro-European stance.
All right, the countdown to the US presidential elections has begun as the race to the White House nears. My colleague Jyotsna Kumar has the latest for you. Listen to this.
All right, well, yes, the election day is near. The U.S. presidential candidates have launched their frantic final hours of campaigning to court the last holdouts in the bitterly contested election. Now let's take a look at the stories that are shaping the race. Now, while the election day is on Tuesday, over 77 million people have already voted, with nearly 48 hours to go for the day. The figure amounts to just over half of the total ballots cast in 2020. The Vice President Kamala Harris also joined the early voters. The Democratic presidential candidate told reporters that she has mailed in her absentee ballot to California as she campaigned in the swing state of Michigan. Now, with the unprecedented early voting numbers, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has doubled down on his predictions over voter fraud in battleground states. Now, he claimed that Democrats in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania are fighting so hard to steal the election.
But you ought to damn well go to paper ballots, you ought to go to voter ID, and you ought to have the election over by 9 o'clock. I'm hearing now they're going to take weeks. Can you imagine? They spend all this money on machines, and they're going to say, we may take an extra 12 days to determine. And what do you think happens during that 12 days? What do you think happens?
Trump complained to supporters about gaps in the bulletproof glass surrounding him at a rally. Trump noted that there were gaps in the panes of glass around him. He then went on to add that an assassin would have to shoot through the news media to get him. He added, "I don't mind that so much." Now, the former president has escaped 2 attempted assassinations this year, including being grazed in the ear by a gunman's bullet during a July rally in Pennsylvania.
And I have a piece of glass over here, and I don't have a piece of glass there. And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind that.
A final New York Times Siena poll flagged incremental changes in swing states, but the results from all 7 remained within the margin of error. Meanwhile, Harris got a boost as the final Des Moines Register poll for Iowa showed a stunning turnaround, with Harris ahead in a state won easily by Trump in 2016 and 2020. Trump dismissed the findings as a fake poll. Now, Harris, desperate to shore up with the Great Lakes states known as the Blue Wall, seen as essential to any Democratic victory, spent the day in Michigan. Trump's Sunday timetable centered on Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, the 3 biggest swing state prizes in the Electoral College system that award states influence, and this is according to their population. And 2 days away from the presidential elections, and today we put the spotlight on the battleground state of Michigan. Falling in the Rust Belt region, the state is famous for the Great Lakes and the automotive industry. Now watch this next report to know how the battleground state of Michigan could sway the U.S. presidential election.
Michigan, one of America's most pivotal swing states, is poised to play a decisive role in the 2024 presidential election. With a history of flipping between parties, Michigan has seen a bellwether in recent elections. After going Republican in 2016, the state turned back to the Democrats in 2020 by a slim margin, making it a key target for both parties as they head into the final stretch of this race. Let's dive into Michigan's role in this year's high-stakes election. With a population of over 10 million and 15 electoral votes up for grabs, Michigan has consistently been a battleground that can tilt the Electoral College. Its politically mixed population and swing tendencies make Michigan an essential state for both campaigns. In 2020, President Biden won Michigan by 2.8%. Thanks in large part to high turnout in Detroit and other urban areas, where Democratic voters, especially younger and diverse communities, turned out strongly. With a broad range of demographics and a mix of Michigan remains highly competitive. The 2020 presidential election in Michigan was tightly contested. Biden's win here returned the state to the Democratic side after Trump's 2016 victory. The close margin in 2020 underscored just how every vote counts in Michigan, with the state's mix of Democratic and Republican bases making it anyone's game. Biden appeared to be a favorite among women, the African American and Latino voters, as well as college graduates, while Trump bagged the support of men, the white population. Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump in Michigan by a slim margin of 1 percentage points, 48% to Trump's 47%, as of October 30th, as per a CNN poll. However, recent polls also showed Trump sometimes ahead, Harris winning by a slim margin or a tie. For Harris to secure Michigan and improve her chances of winning the presidency, she needs strong support from key voter groups, including young voters, Arab Americans, and black voters. Michigan voters identify the economy, abortion, and immigration as their top issues. Trump has tailored his campaign in Michigan to focus on 2 of these areas, emphasizing a revival of the auto industry to address job losses and his stance on illegal immigration, which he argues has hurt the working class. Meanwhile, while Harris' strengths include her stance on abortion rights, the state's 2022 constitutional amendment securing these rights may have reduced the issue's immediate importance for Michigan voters. Will Michigan hold steady with the Democrats, or will it swing back to the Republicans, as it did back in 2016? This state is said to be one of the most crucial battlegrounds on election night. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And covering our elections from the U.S. is our correspondent Susan Tirani, who brings you this report from Times Square in New York. Listen in.
As the 2024 presidential race comes to a close, the final New York Times Siena poll reveals a virtual tie between Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The 7 key battleground states are split, with Harris slightly ahead in Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, while Trump has a narrow lead in Arizona and Michigan. Pennsylvania remains deadlocked. Notably, Harris has gained support among young and Black Hispanic voters, while Donald Trump has made inroads with white voters without a college degree. Nonetheless, it's safe to say it's anyone's game come November 5th. And we'll be following up with all of the latest and bringing you all of the latest on WION. I'm Susan Tehrani in the heart of New York City's Times Square for WION with video journalist Niraj Patel.
And that's all for today. Over to you, Rahesh and him. And it's time now for a quick short break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has reacted to the attack on devotees at a Hindu temple in Brampton. He has called the attacks as unacceptable in the country. We'll get to the full report on the other side of this short break.
Also on the other side, Indian authorities have issued a public advisory asking people to be aware of digital arrest scams. We'll bring you the latest on this and all the details that you need to know on the other side. Stay tuned.
The US race to power, marked by high-octane campaign rallies, life-threatening encounters, game-changing presidential debates, the color and the drama, the key defining moments, deep insights and informed analysis. Watch continuous coverage of the US presidential elections 2024 on WION World is One.
WION brings you a special business talk show where we bring forth the stories of business leaders.
From breakthrough technologies to visionary leadership, we will unlock the trends, the tactics, and dive into the minds of the industry's most influential leaders.
WION brings you this special series to uncover what drives them in a candid talk show, WION Business Masters.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha and Haim. There's lots lined up on the show, but first a quick check on the headlines.
Hindu-Canadian devotees attacked inside Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton. Canadian MP says red line crossed by Khalistani extremists. Opposition leader says attack unacceptable.
India's cybercrime authorities issue public advisory asking people to be aware of digital arrest scams. Probe agency said that they are taking action against this category of cybercrime.
Iran's president says a potential ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon could affect the intensity of Tehran's response to Israel's recent strikes on Iranian military sites.
More than 77 million people have already voted early in the US election ahead of Election Day. The figure amounts to over half of the total ballots cast in last presidential polls.
Donald Trump doubles down on his predictions of voter fraud in battleground states as him and rival Kamala Harris launch frantic final 48 hours of campaigning.
Moldova's incumbent Maya Sandu wins presidential runoff overshadowed by allegations of Russian meddling.
Barcelona continue their brilliant form under Hansi Flick. The Catalan Giants thrash rivals Espanyol 3-1 to move 9 points clear at the top of La Liga.
An attack on Hindu devotees within the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton has invited sharp reactions.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that such acts of violence are unacceptable in the country.
Well, he added that every Canadian has the right to practice their faith freely and safely. Videos of the incident widely shared on social media showed a group of men with flags associated with pro-Khalistani groups wielding sticks and attacking devotees, including women and children, outside the temple.
The video was also shared by a Canadian member of the parliament. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre condemned the violence, calling it completely unacceptable. All Canadians should be free to practice their faith in peace. I will unite our people and end the chaos, said Poilievre.
Canadian MP from Indian origin Chandra Arya said that a red line has been crossed this time.
The recent attack adds to a string of similar incidents documented in recent years. Last year, a Hindu temple in Windsor suffered defacement and anti-India graffiti, sparking widespread condemnation and calls for action from both Canadian and Indian officials.
It comes amid strained ties between India and Canada over the over the killing of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada last year.
And Indian authorities have issued a public advisory asking people to be aware of digital arrest scams as probe agencies said that they are taking action against this category of cybercrime.
The Enforcement Directorate has now filed a charge sheet in one such case against 8 people.
These measures come close on the heels of Prime Minister Narendra Modi urging people to guard against the menace of digital arrests.
Well, the ED said that it has filed a prosecution complaint before a Special Prevention of Money Laundering Act court in Bengaluru last month. The complaint alleges that the 8 accused who were enticing common people through fake IPO allotments and stock market investments through fraudulent apps. The ED also said that some victims of the scam were manipulated under the guise of a fake arrest by the Customs and the CBI, ultimately making them transfer huge funds to various shell or dummy companies under fake fund procedure.
Meanwhile, the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Centre 14C issued a public advisory on Sunday asking people to beware of digital arrest, reminding that those making video calls are not police, CBI, customs officials or judges. The advisory asked people to not fall for these tricks and report such crimes immediately by calling the National Cybercrime Helpline, that's 1930, or logging at the government's portal.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi had on October 27th flagged this issue of fraudsters targeting people with digital arrest, and urged people to adopt the mantra of stop, think and take action when faced with such a scam.
Now, anti-government protesters thronged the streets in Serbia to mourn the deaths of victims of a tragic railway station roof collapse incident.
The accident claimed 14 lives and left 3 people seriously injured. The mourners laid flowers and lit candles in silence as they gathered at the abandoned 19th century train station.
Demonstrators marched past government buildings calling for the arrest of President Alexander Vučić while blaming the government for the tragedy.
Ovi ljudi su poginuli dok su čekali voz, dok su čekali autobus zaljubljeno, dok su čekali da odu sa dedom na selo. Ove ljude je ubila korupcija. Ove ljude je ubio ovaj režim.
Tako je. Uhapsite Vučića!
Ove ljude je ubila država.
Meni ovaj događaj juče nije probudio tugu. I to je najgora stvar koja čovjeku može da se desi. U meni je probudio samo bes i samo jedan tup pogled koji zahteva jednu stvar, a to je odgovornost.
At least 2 children were among those killed in the disaster that took place on Friday. That is when a length of roofing along the entrance to the station collapsed on a sunny day. The station in the city, about 70 kilometers northwest of Belgrade, had undergone renovations in 2021 and 2022. In the wake of the tragedy, opposition parties are accusing Vučić's Serbian Progressive Party and its supporters of negligence and excessive bureaucracy. Public anger against the Spanish royalty spilled over in the flood-affected areas of Valencia,
which has claimed at least 217 lives in the deadliest floods in decades. People heckled the Spanish king and queen, calling them murderers as they visited the Paiporta area. King Philippe had to be shielded by an umbrella as people threw objects, including mud, at the royal couple with chants of murderers. People vented their pent-up anger over what local residents called tardy alerts from the authorities.
People claimed they were not alerted to Tuesday's storm and flooding in the Valencia region, and also the emergency services did not have a timely response when disaster struck the area.
Que están todavía los muertos en los garajes. Las familias están buscando a sus familiares, amigos, por favor, venir, solo pedimos ayuda, no pedimos otra cosa. Y doy las gracias a todo el pueblo español por la solidaridad que hemos tenido con nosotros.
As King Philip walked through a crowd of residents, protesters surrounded him. Police on horseback tried to disperse the crowd as well.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said that the disaster was the second deadliest flood in Europe this century.
Rescue officials in Valencia are still searching for the missing people, with several people still trapped in the debris.
Rescue officials are also trying to salvage thousands of vehicles that were left damaged.
The Spanish government has rushed in more reinforcements to the flood-hit areas. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Saturday announced the deployment of an additional 5,000 soldiers and 5,000 police and civil guards to the worst-hit areas.
And remembering the victims of the tragedy, Pope Francis has called for assistance for flood-hit Valencia.
Preghiamo per la martoriata Ucraina.
We continue to pray for Valencia and other people of Spain who suffer so much these days. What am I doing for the people of Valencia? Do I pray? Do I offer something? Think about this question. I wish everyone a good Sunday and please do not forget to pray for me. Have a good lunch and goodbye.
Buon pranzo e arrivederci.
All right, with the US election turning out to be one of the most tightly contested in recent history, gold prices increased to new heights last week,
putting them on track for their greatest year since 1979. Many investors anticipate additional advances in gold prices near record highs due to its appeal as a safe haven asset. The demand has expanded beyond the early leaders, central banks and Chinese buyers, and this comes as investors seek refuge from market uncertainty in the run-up to Tuesday's election.
The rally is expected to continue regardless of the winner. Patrick Frusetti, portfolio manager at Rose Advisors in New York, told Bloomberg, markets like gold in uncertainty, especially when it has to do with geopolitical issues. He added that's a reason why you'd want to own gold going into the election.
Many speculate the margin of victory could be so razor-thin that it will require a Supreme Court decision. Some are bracing for a nail-biting count, while others are skeptical that it will go that far. Opinion polls are showing a thin majority to Trump, but that is way smaller than the margin of error in these polls.
Worries about the tight race and a close outcome are likely to cause investors to dump their bets on the dollar and the stock markets and rush to safe haven assets.
If foreigners want to invest here, we should be...
And the results of the US election will shape international trade for the next 4 years.
Right, Aim. So it's safe to say that businesses are holding their collective breath. At the moment, US election jitters are stoking uncertainty in global trade.
According to Bloomberg's trade tracker, 3 of the 10 important indicators of international trade were in the below normal territory, marking the highest level in 5 months. 6 key measures were in normal zone. Anxiety over the November 5th US election results and the prospect of heightened trade tensions are reflected in the latest data as well.
Imports from China would be subject to 60% tariffs if Trump takes the White House, similar to the tariffs imposed by the United States on China in 2018 under his tenure. This action again would disrupt already distorted supply chains and trade patterns.
Many countries have already begun to halt the flow of goods. South Korea's exports, which are a measure of worldwide demand, just increased by 1% in the first few weeks of October. That is significantly lower than the rise of 7.5% in September. Cargo volumes have dropped to their lowest point since February in Hong Kong, a transshipment hub. February had marked the weakest since 1997.
Concerns are well-founded among businesses and world leaders. If tit-for-tat trade tariffs follow, Bloomberg Economics estimates that US imports would fall by over 50% and exports by 60%. The global economy would take a hit if Trump's tariffs are realized and China retaliates. If that does happen, experts call for world GDP to fall 0.5% by 2028. Well, let's now take a look at the news from the world of technology. WhatsApp has banned over 100,000 bad accounts in India in September, with 1.6 million accounts proactively removed before any user complains. According to its monthly compliance report under India's 2021 IT rules, the report also noted that WhatsApp received more than 8,000 user issues from India. That is, to catch misuse, WhatsApp monitors accounts at 3 points. Number one, during registration, then while messaging and after receiving negative feedback. A team of experts also reviews complex cases to support this automated detection.
The Walt Disney Company has launched a new division called the Office of Technology Enablement to explore advanced technologies like AI, augmented reality, and mixed reality. This initiative aims to enhance experiences in Disney's films, television, and theme park segments. A team of specialists will lead this innovation, focusing on immersive experiences that blend physical and digital realms seamlessly. Meanwhile, reports indicate that tech companies have sold around 1.7 million AR/VR headsets this year, highlighting growing interest in these immersive technologies.
According to a recent report, AI-driven cyber attacks have become the leading cybersecurity threat for businesses in the third quarter of 2024. The report has also highlighted two other major risks, including the growing dependence on IT vendors and an uncertain regulatory landscape regarding AI. Well, as the US election approaches, companies are struggling to assess potential risks from various scenarios tied to the contestants' policies on regulation and trade. This challenge is compounded by recent US Supreme Court, which rules that limited federal agencies' regulatory power, creating added uncertainty. Other events, such as the major July outage by cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, have also spotlighted concerns over organizations' heavy reliance on large IT providers.